Protectors of the Grid. Chapter 13. The 4-hour flight from San Diego to Oklahoma City gave each of them time to think. They chose to fly Southwest Airlines, and because they arrived at the gate just as the flight was finishing boarding, there were no empty seats, 3 together. Tara found a middle seat in one row, Charlie in another. Ben looked around for a likely prospect to talk out of an aisle seat and found an accommodating young woman with a sleeping infant who was willing to move to the empty middle seat beside her. Ben stretched out his legs gratefully, and when the cart came round, bought her everything she wanted. Ben knew that after his experiences on Molokai, he could never again so thoroughly dismiss the spiritual realities that he now knew surrounded him. Still, T kinda pissed him off. He didn't want it to be real, and he didn't want to feel so utterly foolish, since it was real, that he had wasted so much time and caused himself so much grief. And he still wasn't sure how to integrate the new information with his perceptions of religion from his family's practices. Even now, their lives revolved around the church, which was their community. Most of their friends belonged to the same Presbyterian church they did, although their neighbors and closest friends drove across town to the Episcopal Church. How much was social comfort, and how much was actual belief? And Tara? The family loved her in spite of her. Well, he was no longer calling it weirdness. He had stopped using that word. It was her ability to see energy and to know and feel things that others didn't that set her apart. And yet apparently she didn't feel any conflict between the Christianity of her childhood and the eclectic spiritual traditions that now informed her life. I'll have to ask her about that, Ben thought right before he dozed off. Tara relaxed into her seat, relieved that her fellow passengers were not feeling too chatty. The young woman in the window seat was deeply engrossed in a paperback novel. The man in the aisle seat was hitting the keys of his notebook computer with surprising speed, since he used only his index fingers. She was relieved not to have anyone else's attention bombarding her energy. She was drained and had a lot to sort out. Tara closed her eyes as though to sleep. Ben had continued to surprise her with his openness, but she knew that all his resistance would not die because of a few eye-opening journeys. It never felt as foreign to me because I was so much younger when magic made itself known to me. I'll bet Ben is struggling right now to integrate this new reality into who he thought he was and how he thought the world works. Maybe it's time I tell him about some of the pivotal events for me. At least it will give him a chance to talk about his feelings, ask questions, challenge me even more. Her lips twitched. I suspect he would enjoy a good fight right about now, the way men do when they are frustrated. Tara felt her heart warm and the energy spread out through her body like tiny fingers making tingles. He really is trying. I'm so proud of him. Charlie watched absently as the flight attendant served the rows in front of her. She wasn't sure of what to make of this change in Ben, or whether she could trust it. They pretty much had this nailed until Kachi walked out. The prototypes had worked flawlessly, creating an ecstatic excitement among the venture capitalists for whom they'd demonstrated. They had not expected a problem going from proto to mass live. Had the problem been there all along, or had it— Charlie sat up suddenly. Had it just materialized after Kachi left? As Kachi left? Because Kachi left? What if it wasn't a tech problem at all? What if it was a spiritual block to make sure the ferry was used for— what had Ben said, only the highest good of humanity? What if this block was to force Ben to address the potential not only for good, but for destruction, if this technology were not handled properly? Charlie was on full alert now. Before, Ben had only been excited about the beautiful potential the ferry represented for bringing people together. Had he once thought or cared about privacy? Did he realize that there had to be some form of checks and balances to keep their eyes in the sky from being used for nasty stuff, war-making, political maneuvering, spying, or other covert operations? Charlie leaned back into her seat, but the adrenaline pumping through her system was not going to let her sleep. No matter. She closed her eyes and began to inhale slowly and steadily, then exhale in the same slow, steady pace. Her body picked up the rhythm quickly due to long practice, and her consciousness sailed out into the ethers to consult the beings who guided her. Tara and Charlie were grateful that Ben had rented a minivan, which now smelled like the Chinese takeout they had grabbed on their way out of Oklahoma City. Full tummies and a comfortable seat relaxed them enough for a good long nap as Ben drove the familiar highway south out of Oklahoma City. Even miles outside the city, I-35 was heavily traveled with big trucks as well as the usual buses and passenger cars, way busier than Ben remembered from decades ago. He was glad both Tara and Charlie were dozing. He felt weird, and this time it was definitely the right word. I don't feel like myself anymore, so who the hell am I, and what the hell is happening to me? Is this what the ego death that Cale talked about feels like? It's damned uncomfortable. The irritation that had been building inside Ben was creating an internal pressure that he was having trouble managing. Tara, who had been curled in the passenger seat beside him, stirred and stretched, then sat up and looked around. "Where are we? How much farther?" "Oh, we've got a couple more hours to Durant." "What time will that be? Will Grace be there? Where will we stay tonight? Daddy, are we there yet?" Ben mimicked. Charlie spoke from the seat behind Tara. "Daddy, can we stop? I need to go potty." "Me too, Daddy. I need to pee too." Tara made a little girl kind of face. Ben sighed. Girls, behave yourselves. We'll stop at the next gas station." They didn't, though, because the next one was weather-beaten and shabby-looking. They continued on to a cluster of gas stations and fast food restaurants right off the exit to US 70 and pulled into the McDonald's parking lot. Charlie had the door half open almost as soon as they stopped and bolted to the door through which they could see the signs for the restrooms. Tara was right behind her but paused. "Want anything?" "Nah, not hungry yet? Coke, maybe?" Tara nodded and hurried inside. Ben locked the van and went in to use the facilities himself. By the time he came out, both women were leaning against the van, sipping cold drinks. After they all piled inside and were back on the road, it became obvious from the smells that they had bought more than drinks. "Fries, Ben?" Tara offered him entry into a super gigantic pasteboard container of crispy potatoes. Without taking his eyes off the road, Ben reached over, grabbed several, and stuffed them all into his mouth. "You're eating fries and drinking soda? Miss, I eat organic only, mostly raw, thank you." Tara crossed her eyes at him. "If I'm going to guzzle flavored sugar water, I might as well have some tasty carbs as well. I'll ask my body to forgive me later." Behind them, Charlie munched on her own bag of fries but grimaced slightly at the taste of high-fructose corn syrup in her lemonade. "Yeah, I'll have to do penance, too." They drove in silence for a while as the scorching afternoon sun lowered a bit and the shadows began to stretch a little farther across the landscape. "We won't be there for another hour," Ben thought. "I'm running out of time. Either of you babes willing to drive for a while?" "I'm ready for a break. Besides, I need to talk with Tara about some things." "I'll take the wheel for a while, Ben," Charlie volunteered. Ben pulled over at the next rest stop, which consisted of a half-dozen struggling young cottonwoods feebly sheltering the concrete picnic tables near a square tile building housing restrooms. Waves of heat still rose from concrete and hard-packed earth, so no one dallied getting back into the van. Charlie cranked up the air conditioning for the next 10 miles or so. She aimed one vent toward Ben, who had climbed into the seat behind her, and the other toward Tara, sitting beside him. "Tara, how can you—" "Ben, would you like me to tell you?" They both laughed at speaking simultaneously. "Yes, Ben, I think it's time I tell you more of my story." He nodded. Charlie turned the AC fan down to normal as soon as they started talking so that she could hear better. This was information she sure did not want to miss.